Hello and welcome to this certification program update here at the LoRaWAN Live in Berlin. My name is Derek Hunt and I'm the certification committee chair. What I want to go through on this session then is to talk about the release now of the LoRaWAN certification test tool, and I'll go on to explain in more detail what that is, how it can be used and what the benefits of it is. I also want to go through the collective LoRaWAN device qualification program, which has been announced by a large number of the European operators, and explain a little bit about that and how that's driving enhancements to the interoperability testing, and I'll go through that as well. And then also the mandating of RF testing, and then finally an update on the LoRaWAN 1.04 and where we are against that specification. For the LoRaWAN certification test tool then, we're pleased to announce that it's now available. The LoRa Alliance has been developing this LCTT so that all LoRa Alliance device manufacturers can effectively pre-test their device before sending it to an authorized test house for the full LoRaWAN certification. And this is something we've been asked for on several occasions now, that people want that ability to test before going to the test houses. We believe it will accelerate the certification program and be a significant benefit to LoRa Alliance members. And hopefully it will save time and money, allowing the devices to be debugged and the design finalized prior to sending it for formal certification. So as I said, the LCTT is a pre-certification and regression testing tool. It can be used and will be used at the device's own manufacturer. It will enable the manufacturers to prove their design before shipping it out for formal certification. The LCT itself will have two different modes of operation. It will have its normal mode, which will do the full pre-certification and run through the certification test as defined by the LoRa Alliance. And it will also have a debug mode. And I'll explain a little bit more about that debug mode later. The initial release is for testing specific regions, and this first release will cover all of the European ones. The full availability of all the releases will be in September 2019. And the idea is that the test tool will run on a local PC, connect to a local gateway, and will have a connection back to a licensed server in order to give you a license to run that test tool on the local PC. The tool itself will also be made available to the test houses, so if they wish to use that instead of their own test harness, they're free to do so. And DECRA has been selected as the vendor for this tool, and it's based on the LoRaWAN certification test harness, which is already approved for LoRaWAN certification, so it already has all the approvals and the authorization before we start, and now it's making it available to everyone. So what does it look like? You're presented with normal once you've downloaded the zip file and installed it on your PC with a login screen. Once you've gone through that, you then have the ability to set up the tool itself. And you can see from this technologies and project management screen that there are two releases with that type. One is the debug mode, which I talked about, and one is the full release. So once you've downloaded it, you'll request this license file, which you can see on the highlighted box. That will send an email back to the Alliance, and they will send you the necessary detail to install a license for the tool on the local PC. So once you're into it, this is what the main screen would look like now. So this is the project's screen. So here you can set up all the different types of projects that you want to work on, and this is obviously a screen that's got all the different bands that you can select from, as well as any of the optional features that you can put into this, and this is in the ICS editor screen. So you set all the defaults up of how you want to actually drive your end device for testing. The next bit then is just trying to actually start specifying a bit more detail about the device itself, what the keys are, what the power it transmits, whether you're doing ABP or OTA type development, and that's enabling you to set up the tests. Then you go into the general parameters one, which gives you more details of the types of environment that you're going to actually be testing against. And then finally, you can actually start selecting the test cases to run. So you can see this has a list of test cases against it. This one's already been run, so there's some pass and fail indications, and they're shown by the results screen. We've obviously red for fail and the green for the pass. Once you've been through that, the next thing then is you can see the results, and you go into the next screen and gives you the full detailed results of those, where you'll see all the details of what it's been done. But also what we've got is a much more simplified way of actually seeing it as well, where you can go onto this screen and you see the full detail of each test, how long it took, how many times it's been run, and whether it passed or failed. And then finally, you can go into the debug of the test results, and you can see it from this screen, which allows you basically just to keep expanding now the logs. So if one of those sections had failed, you'd see it in red. You'd just then keep clicking on to expand it until you actually get down to the messages that have been used to be transmitted and received in order to do the test. So the other thing I said I'd mention a little bit about was in the debug mode. So when you're in the debug mode, at that time you're able to edit the scripts themselves. In the release mode, you're just using the scripts defined by the LoRa Alliance, which is an exact replica of what will go through from the certification. In the debug mode, you have the ability to edit those scripts, and that's really the difference. So you can set up your own local testing to do a particular test over and over again, or modify some of the parameters of that testing. So in terms of the tool, it will be accessible from the certification web page. So if you go onto the main web page, there'll be a tab in there that talks about the LCTT. From there, you can click on that. That will take you into the higher logic page, where you'll be able to download the zip file and follow the instructions then to get the tool ready and available working on your system. And what we'll also set up is a Bugzilla type tracking system to record any issues that you have with the tool. So that's pretty much everything on the LCT. So the next thing is the collective development program.
What the operators want to see is, before they put any quality of service on the devices that go onto their network, not only do they perform to the protocols, but they have the RF performance to support it. And they will follow the guidelines that we have set and have published over a year and a half ago now from the LoRa Alliance. So really why? And this is the crux of it. So we will continue to use the tests concentrated on full thing, and for those who know a little bit about the certification program, if you just run a device in its normal application mode, there's a lot of the functionality that you can't get access to. It may be a temperature sensor, for instance, that normally only sends unconfirmed messages, but maybe when it reaches a critical temperature, 150 degrees or 200 degrees, it wants to shout, hey, you've got to listen to me, and I need to send a confirmed message at that point. Well, clearly, if you're just testing it with the application, then unless you've got a super oven or some other way of doing that, you cannot ever test that functionality. So what we've said is, it's a sort of two-stage approach in terms of testing the protocol. The first is, we're going to test all of the functionality by using the certification test application, which actually just goes in and allows us to set confirmed, unconfirmed, see what packet rates, see what messages received. And then some of the additional tests that the operators want, which is, okay, now we'll switch back to its normal operating software and run a few additional tests on top of that, and that's what we're calling the interoperability tests. And that's what we're just working with now. We've started the list of creating exactly what that list is that needs to be run on it. And the key thing is, obviously, is by going through this, you don't have to then go through and talk to all the different ones. So what's going to change? I think we've pretty covered most of these. We're including these additional tests now as part of the mandatory part of it. The interoperability tests are going to be run using the device application software, and we're currently incorporating all of that into the certification program. So effectively what they're saying is, going forward, they'll want to see the certification program as it stands today, these additional interoperability tests, and the RF performance, and that will be fundamental to going onto their network. So what does that mean in terms of us and our test stages? So We've got pre-testing, which we talked about, LCT. We've got the conformance testing, which is the current certification program. We've got these additional ones, and then we've got the RF performance testing. So one of the other key things, and this is coming again out of the operator forum, is they want us now to ensure that we actually test the RF side of this. So we're mandating now that from the 1st of July, for Europe in particular, every device that goes through certification will need to go through that RF measurement stage. Just for those who aren't aware of it, we've designed this to be basically a guideline, and it does a few simple measurements. It measures basically the transmitted power. So although you go through regulatory, and regulatory might check that you don't exceed an amount, it doesn't actually look at, well, what is the thing that's actually been given out. So what this simple process and procedure is, and guideline that we've written does, it basically does a 360-degree scan of the device. It finds the transmitted power and where's the best transmitted power. We define what frequencies, depending on the bands it's going to be on, that these measurements are going to be made at. Once it's found that point, that sweet spot, it then says, okay, I know what the power output is. Now I'm going to do some sensitivity measurements, where basically you turn it around on its head, you put it into receive mode at that point, you start sending packets to it with effectively a LoRaWAN gateway that you then just keep reducing the power of the power of the power until you get to the point where you see a 10% packet error rate test. And effectively that is your sensitivity figure at that point. Once we know what the output power was that your device received when it hit that 10% error. So it's a few simple tests that actually will just give the confidence to everyone who's using the device that not only is the transmit power okay, but the sensitivity of it is okay. So, last thing I wanted to really just sort of cover was the LoRaWAN 104. The key thing really is, when we talk about all of the great things and all of the great networks that are out there, the majority of those devices are deployed using the LoRaWAN 1.0 platform. That's where, as I see it, the money, the revenue, our existence for carrying on to future builds is going to come from. So what we said with the Alliance is we were conscious, and we've seen it more than others when you go through certification, that different people will read a specification, and if you get 5 people reading a specification, you'll probably get 5 different interpretations of that specification. So what we set out to do was say, okay, the 1.0 platform is going to be with us for a long time. Let's make sure that any possible inconsistencies or ambiguities that are in that spec, we've actually ironed out. So we've spent probably the last 4 or 5 months working with the certification committee as input and the technical committee to go through effectively the LoRaWAN 102, 103 and do an update to it. So what's in here is a normative language change. So the first thing, for those who've read the spec will know there's lots, well, it could do this, or it might do that, or it could, on a sunny day, do this. So we try to say, no, it must do that, it shall do that, it doesn't need to do that, and make that perfectly clear. So that is the first sort of bit. The next thing is, we know there's been specific characteristics around some of the behaviours that we want to do, and really all I'm just trying to list in here is what we assumed was in scope. The thing that we didn't want to do was anything drastic to it, like map commands. We talked about 1.1, and that has a different key hierarchy, so we didn't want to include those as part of that. But basically, these are the ones that are out of scope, is anything that involves those things down the left, but anything that's really on the left-hand side of it is what we've tried to do. And rather than now just release the spec and say, that's it, off you go and get it, what we're actually doing is going through and saying, actually the spec won't get officially released until we have, first of all, at least 1 reference stack, ideally 2 reference stacks that are available and published so that everyone can see it, and that the full test harness and the test suites are available to actually test it. So by that process, we'll go through and actually prove that anything we've changed or anything we've touched in there is a fully working, fully validated system before it actually gets shipped out of the door. So by the time you guys get to see it and we officially release it, we should have everything else in the subsystem that goes behind it. And that is a really big change, because in the past we've sort of done a version of the spec, and sometimes it's gone out for people to have a trial with it, and we've found problems, and then we get into all sorts of mess. So by trying to tie this loop up together, we're ensuring that the quality of what we actually release goes out with it. So in terms of where we are, we're literally in the stage now of just sort of freezing it. Once it's now frozen, we can now start the work from certification, just to create the program, to create the update to the certification specifications that need to be done with that, and then get the test harnesses up and done. So I'm expecting that'll be 2-3 months, something like that, before it's finally released. But the intention is definitely this year, and definitely as soon as we can possibly make it. Okay, and that was pretty much it. Any questions from anyone on anything?
If you're a member and you download the tool, but you're having a third-party design house do design and testing for you, do they have to be a member as well, or can they use the tool on your behalf?
Good question. The license will be issued to you as the member, and will not be transferable to any other. So potentially, if it's in your lab, they can come in and use it under your environment, but we will, at this stage, it may change in the future, but for now, we want to be able to control and understand who's using this and make sure it's only it's a benefit to members. So currently, the way it's done is it will only be if you're a member will you get the license to do it. That license will effectively lock it to that PC as well. So even if you wanted to then move it, if you move the PC, you'd probably get away with it, but you couldn't then just copy the software and put it somewhere else.
So to complete with this question, so if adopters want to use for this tool, they have to pay some fees or how?
No, right. So certainly for now, my goal really is to promote the ecosystem. So the long-term aim is, or my goal is the long-term aim is there is no cost associated with this. At the moment, obviously, I've got the agreement from the sort of board level at that point that for now we're pushing it out. Let's just get people using it. My intention longer term is that there won't be a cost to this, and certainly for this year there is not. But I can never say never. So at the moment it's out for free, and basically it will be available to any member at any level. The first release may be limited just because we're trying to control the original numbers of it. It may be one per company, or if you're a larger company we may be able to do extras, but initially the intention was sort of one per company. We'll see what the volume is. If there's enough, then we'll then allow more licenses to go out.
For LoRa 1.1, this will be later, or?
So yeah, I mean, obviously, one of the key things with all of this is we're releasing this tool now, so it's 102. It has got the tests in to do the Class B for 103, but we've struggled to find a full stack that we can really verify it against, but it's actually in the test harness. But the task now going forward, obviously, as soon as 104 becomes available, that will get updated for that. As soon as 1.1 or 1.1.1 becomes available, then the tool will be updated for that as well. So it's expected that there will be a continuous development going forward now that will keep this tool up to date. And also in the future, this tool will be used, what we talked about, the releasing of the spec. The intention is that this tool will become fundamental to releasing of the specs as well in the future, because for 1.1, we can do exactly the same. For 1.1 won't go out the door until we have the reference stacks available and we have effectively the test harness to go with it.
And if I, for example, if I test my hardware design, verify around behavior at the test lab, and then when I update the stack continuously, is it then sufficient to just run this test tool?
So obviously we get back into, that's when we're into the certification by similarity type process. And again, if you can convince me and the test houses that you have no change to the MAC layer and the protocol layer, the only change you've done is to the application, then that is a candidate that goes through.
But if you change it and you test it with the test tool?
No, so what is fundamental to that is that the version that you test at the test house is effectively the version of software that is certified. So whenever you do an update to it, you would then need to go through the similarity process, which again, the whole purpose of that was to allow you to do small changes or whatever, but just allow you to then certify the next version of your
The test tool doesn't change anything to that?
No, I mean, obviously, you'll run it against the test tool anyway, so, and longer term, this will probably get used as well, and will probably form a mandatory part of certification by similarity, but at this stage, I just want to roll the tool out and get everyone using it, really to try and push people and help people so that they feel comfortable when they have a design, it's finished, I can now take it and get it certified. And obviously, once it's certified, you get all the other benefits of it's on the LoRa Alliance website, you get a certificate, you're allowed to use the CM mark.
Thank you.
On the certification by similarity, if you're a chip vendor or even a module vendor and you certify your product at a test house, then someone takes that module and puts it in an enclosure and messes up the RF performance.
Right, so, thank you, good question.
Yeah.
I know where you're going, so
Yeah.
currently the similarity process is only valid for the protocol side of it. So we have not included the RF performance in that, so that would still require then a separate one if you're touching or modifying the case. So when you go through the certification program in the first place, part of what's happened when you do the RF measurement is obviously the labs take full pictures of the casing and the construction and everything else. If you change any of that, then potentially you have to go back through the RF performance testing.
Will there be a minimum performance level? Because our device is really small, so obviously we have not that of a great RF performance.
So thank you, and that's another really good question, because one of the things that's in here is we've set the guidelines on how to measure it. We have not set the guidelines of what the device should be capable of. And it brings me on to another important point, which is when the device has been tested for RF, and again, if you look on the LoRa Alliance website now, the certification, there's a separate tab for RF. So what we're saying is, for those manufacturers who have had their device RF tested and are willing and wanting to say what the results are, we will put that onto the website. You click in, you see the picture of the thing, you can see the test report, and it will give you the values. If you're a device manufacturer that maybe doesn't want to share that information, fine.
If you're not proud of it.
Well, we still want to capture the information that's been tested because it's extremely useful for the operators to know, actually, this device has been tested. As you say, it may be a small device, so it may not be even physically possible for it to give the maximum output power. But we deliberately don't want to penalise that because the use case you've got, it might work perfectly well with you. All we're trying to do is provide the information so that an operator who wants to use your device knows whatever the limitations or constraints are. So when you do the RF testing, there's no pass-fail, it's literally just, this was the TX transmission power, this was the sensitivity, and those figures are what effectively goes into the report. There's no grading, there's no colouring of it, it's just the raw figures. And then that information is available to the operators or whoever so that they can decide whether or not that fits their need.
Derek?
So,
One question, probably more clarification, because I was reading the news or the press release about this, and to be honest, I was a little bit confused because this tool was mentioned together with regulatory testing, but also with RF performance testing. What I learned now, this tool, or my understanding is, this tool is just or only for protocol MAC testing, right?
correct, yes.
Is there any plans to extend this in the future?
So, I mean, obviously, it's protocol and MAC testing. We will be updating it, and the few extra tests that we've agreed for this interoperability will get included in that. That's fairly straightforward. It's an interesting one. We haven't looked at the possibility yet, but one of the things that is there is the guidelines we have produced are doable probably for most people with some competent or enough skills to be able to do it. So those guidelines are available to all members. So there's nothing that actually stops you anyway taking the guidelines on how to do the RF performance and repeating those measurements yourself, or going to your own local test lab or whatever to do it, or use one of the off-the-shelf bits of equipment which will allow you to do that. So currently I think it's still within the realms of the users who can do that. Obviously, if there's a further demand in the future, we can look at if there's anything we can do to put that in, but it's getting more complicated then. This isn't a simple tool you can just download, which is really what we're trying to make it quick, easy, accessible to everyone. Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you.